It was an ordinary afternoon at a bustling downtown diner. The kind of place where the smell of sizzling bacon and fresh coffee greeted you at the door. Elon Musk, wearing a plain hoodie and jeans, stepped in quietly. He wasn't looking for attention, just a good meal and some time to think. But on his head sat a bright red MAGA hat, the words unmistakable, "Make America Great Again." The diner was packed, and as Musk walked to an open table near the window, conversation started to fade. People recognized him almost immediately, but it wasn't just his presence that caught their attention. The hat was polarizing. Some glanced at him with raised eyebrows, others whispered among themselves. A man at the counter muttered, "What's he trying to prove now?" Musk sat down, unfazed by the glances. A server approached hesitantly, taking his order. He asked for a black coffee and an omelette, his tone polite but distant. The server nodded and hurried off, the tension in the room palpable. It didn't take long for the manager to appear. A middle-aged man with a sharp suit and a name tag that read David, he walked straight to Musk's table, his face a mix of authority and annoyance. "Sir," David began, his voice firm, "I'm going to have to ask you to leave." Musk looked up, raising an eyebrow. "Leave? Why?" David gestured at the hat. "That hat. It's causing a disruption among our patrons. This is a private establishment, and we reserve the right to refuse service." Musk leaned back, studying the man for a moment. The diner had gone silent now, all eyes were on them. "Interesting," Musk said calmly. "You're asking me to leave because of a hat?" David crossed his arms. "It's not just a hat. It represents something divisive. We don't want trouble here." Musk's lips twitched into a faint smile. "I see. So, you're kicking me out because some people might disagree with what this hat represents." David's expression hardened. "It's not personal, sir. It's about maintaining peace in my restaurant." Musk nodded slowly, then stood up, taking the hat off and setting it on the table. "All right. If that's your decision, I'll leave. But remember this moment." David looked confused but said nothing as Musk walked out the door, leaving the hat behind. The whispers in the diner grew louder, some supporting the manager's decision, others questioning it. One patron muttered, "Did he really just kick Elon Musk out? Over a hat?" The next morning, the diner was unusually quiet. David stood behind the counter, flipping through receipts, when one of his employees burst into the room, holding a phone. "David, you need to see this," she said, wide-eyed. On the screen was a tweet from Elon Musk. It read, "Got kicked out of a diner yesterday for wearing a hat. Instead of anger, I see an opportunity. Let's talk about tolerance and free expression. Oh, and to the manager, you'll hear from me soon." The tweet had gone viral. Millions of likes, retweets, and comments flooded in. Some defended Musk, others sided with the manager, but everyone was talking about it. By noon, reporters began showing up outside the diner, cameras rolling. David tried to downplay the situation, but the attention was overwhelming. He avoided interviews, hoping it would blow over. But it didn't. 2 weeks later, the diner's lease was bought out. David received the notice late in the evening. The new owner? Musk Enterprises. David stared at the document in disbelief, his hands trembling. The next morning, the diner reopened with a brand new look. Its name had been changed to the Red Hat Café, the interior was sleek, modern, and welcoming, but what stood out most was a plaque mounted near the entrance. It read, "This café is dedicated to open dialogue and the celebration of diverse perspectives. Let's sit, talk, and share a meal, no matter what hat you wear." The café became an instant sensation. People from all walks of life flocked to it, not just for the food but for the principle it represented. Musk himself visited often, sometimes sitting with strangers and engaging in deep conversations about everything from politics to technology. As for David, he was offered a position at the cafe, a second chance, Musk had called it. Initially hesitant, David accepted. Over time, he began to see things differently. The cafe became more than a restaurant, it became a space for understanding and connection. And every so often, someone would ask Musk about the incident that started it all. His response was always the same, delivered with a small smile. It wasn't about the hat. It was about the conversation we weren't having. As the Red Hat Cafe grew in popularity, it became more than just a restaurant, it turned into a cultural phenomenon. People lined up outside, not only to try the food but to experience the atmosphere. The cafe became a symbol of open dialogue, where anyone could walk in, sit down, and talk about their beliefs without fear of judgment. Musk frequently stopped by unannounced. Sometimes he would sit quietly in a corner, sipping coffee and observing the lively discussions that filled the room. Other times, he would join a table of strangers, sparking debates or sharing stories from his life. The cafe's reputation spread far and wide, and soon, celebrities, politicians, and influencers were visiting, eager to be part of what the media had dubbed the Red Hat movement. One evening, as Musk sat at a table near the window, David cautiously approached him. The former manager had been working at the cafe for weeks now, mostly behind the scenes. He had kept his interactions with Musk brief, still unsure how to navigate the strange new dynamic between them. "Mind if I join you?" David asked, holding a cup of coffee. Musk looked up and smiled. "Not at all." David sat down, fidgeting slightly. "I've been meaning to say something." Musk waited, sipping his coffee. David took a deep breath. "When I kicked you out of the diner that day, I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting the business, the customers. But I realize now I was just afraid." "Afraid of what?" Musk asked, his tone gentle. David hesitated. "Afraid of conflict. Afraid of being judged. That hat, it brought out something in people. Anger, division. I didn't want to deal with it, so I took the easy way out." Musk nodded, leaning forward slightly. "And now?" David looked around the cafe, watching as people of all backgrounds shared tables, laughing and debating. "Now I see what I missed. It's not about agreeing with each other. It's about listening. I didn't give you, or anyone, a chance to be heard. And for that, I'm sorry." Musk's expression softened. "Apology accepted. You know, David, fear is natural. It's what we do with it that defines us." David nodded, his shoulders relaxing. "Thank you. For giving me another chance. For not holding a grudge." Musk smiled. "Second chances are important. Besides, this place wouldn't be what it is without that moment. Sometimes, the things we're most afraid of lead to the greatest opportunities." As time went on, the Red Hat Cafe expanded. New locations opened in cities around the world, each one designed to foster connection and understanding. The cafe's motto, "Sit down, talk, and listen," became a global mantra, inspiring countless others to create spaces for open dialogue. The hat that started it all was framed and mounted on the wall of the original cafe, alongside a simple quote from Musk. "It's not the symbol that matters. It's what we do with it." Asterisk. For David, the journey had been transformative. Once a man driven by fear, he now became one of the cafe's most passionate advocates, encouraging others to embrace discomfort and seek understanding. As for Musk, he continued to drop by occasionally, always unassuming, always curious. Whenever someone asked him why he had gone to so much trouble over a single incident, his answer was always the same. It wasn't trouble. It was a chance to build something better. And those chances are worth everything. And so, what had started as a moment of tension and division turned into a movement that changed the way people saw each other, one conversation at a time. Years passed, and the Red Hat Cafe became a cornerstone of Musk's legacy, not for its financial success, but for its cultural impact. Schools and universities began adopting the cafe's model, creating dialogue zones where students could openly discuss opposing views. Corporations implemented similar spaces in their offices, fostering collaboration and mutual respect among employees. But with success came challenges. Critics emerged, claiming the cafe's mission was overly idealistic, that it glossed over the deeper divides in society. Some accused Musk of using the cafe as a publicity stunt, a way to distract from his other ventures. Social media debates flared up, with hashtags like #RedHatDebate and #NotJustAConversation trending for weeks. Musk, however, remained unfazed. He continued to show up unannounced at the cafe, often surprising patrons by engaging in heartfelt conversations. He would sit with anyone, students, factory workers, even those who openly criticized him. It wasn't about winning arguments, it was about proving that dialogue was possible, even in the most unlikely of places. One day, a young journalist named Maya walked into the original Red Hat Cafe with a determined look on her face. She had been following the cafe's rise for years but remained skeptical of its true impact. Armed with a notebook and recorder, she approached Musk, who was seated at his usual corner table, sipping coffee and reading a dog-eared book. "Mr. Musk," she began, "do you mind if I ask you some questions for an article I'm writing?" Musk looked up, his expression neutral. "Only if you call me Elon." "And sure, go ahead." Maya took a seat, her recorder already running. "A lot of people admire what you've built here, but others say it's just a band-aid over deeper societal issues. What do you say to that?" Musk smiled faintly. "I'd say they're right." Maya blinked, caught off guard. "You agree?" "Of course," Musk said, leaning forward. "A cafe won't solve the world's problems. But it's not supposed to. It's just a starting point, a spark. Real change happens when people take what they experience here and carry it into the world." Maya frowned, scribbling notes. "But do you think it's enough? Talking, I mean. Isn't action more important?" Musk nodded. "Action is everything. But action without understanding leads to chaos. The conversations we have here, they're the foundation for meaningful action. You can't build a house without a solid foundation, right?" Maya paused, considering his words. "What about the critics who say this is all just a way to make yourself look good?" Musk chuckled softly. "If I cared about looking good, I wouldn't wear this." He pointed to his hoodie, which had a faint coffee stain on the sleeve. Maya couldn't help but laugh, and for the first time, her skepticism wavered. That evening, Maya stayed longer than she'd planned. She put her recorder away and joined Musk and a group of strangers at a large table. They talked about everything: politics, technology, climate change, even their favorite childhood books. By the time the cafe closed, she realized she hadn't just written a story, she'd lived it. When her article was published, it wasn't the exposé she had initially envisioned. Instead, it was titled "The Red Hat Cafe, a Small Idea That's Changing the World." It became a viral sensation, sparking renewed interest in the cafe's mission. In the years that followed, the Red Hat Cafe became more than a brand, it became a symbol of hope in a divided world. People wore pins and shirts with the cafe's motto, "Sit down, talk, and listen," as a quiet statement of their belief in connection over conflict. Musk's role gradually shifted. He spent less time in the public eye, focusing on mentoring others to carry the cafe's mission forward. Claire, the once dismissive restaurant manager who had been at the center of the original incident, became the global ambassador for the cafe. Her speeches about her transformation inspired millions. And then, one day, Musk made an announcement on social media. "The Red Hat Cafe doesn't belong to me anymore. It belongs to all of you. Keep the conversations going." He transferred ownership of the entire enterprise to a non-profit foundation, ensuring its mission would continue long after he was gone. On a quiet evening, many years later, a group of young strangers sat at a table in the original cafe. They didn't know each other when they walked in, but they left as friends, bonded by a conversation that started with, "So, what brings you here?" On the wall, beneath the framed red hat, a new plaque had been added. It read, "The world doesn't change through silence. It changes through connection. Start with a conversation." And somewhere, far from the limelight, Musk smiled, knowing his simple act of defiance had grown into something far greater than anyone could have imagined. Years passed, and the Red Hat Cafe had become a global institution, a symbol of unity in a world that often seemed divided. Its influence stretched far beyond coffee and conversation. Communities began hosting Red Hat dialogues, schools integrated empathy-driven discussions into their curriculums, and even governments adopted similar models to encourage open dialogue among citizens. But Musk had quietly stepped away. His presence in the cafe world had become more of a legend than a regular occurrence. People whispered stories of him showing up at random locations, sitting down with strangers to talk, but no one could ever confirm if it was true. He had left the cafe in capable hands, believing its mission no longer needed him to succeed. One evening, years after the cafe's founding, Claire sat in the original Red Hat Cafe, now considered a historical landmark. The crowd was bustling as always, filled with people laughing, debating, and connecting. She sipped her coffee, reflecting on the journey that had brought her here. From the day she kicked Musk out of that diner to becoming the face of a movement, her life had changed in ways she could never have imagined. The bell above the cafe's door chimed, and Claire looked up instinctively. Her heart skipped a beat. There he was, Elon Musk, older now but unmistakable, standing in the doorway. He wasn't wearing a red hat this time, just a simple hoodie and jeans. His presence drew a few curious glances, but most people didn't seem to notice him. He spotted Claire and smiled, walking over to her table. "Mind if I join you?" Claire grinned. "You don't have to ask." Musk sat down, placing a coffee cup on the table. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the cafe's energy buzz around them. Finally, Claire spoke. "Did you ever think it would become this big?" she asked, gesturing at the room. Musk shrugged, a faint smile on his lips. "I didn't think about how big it would get. I just thought about the first step. One conversation at a time." Claire nodded, letting his words sink in. "Do you miss it? Being involved?" Musk chuckled. "I don't need to be involved anymore. This place, it's alive on its own. That's the point, isn't it? To create something that outlasts you." Claire smiled, feeling a sense of pride she couldn't quite put into words. "You did more than create a cafe, Elon. You created a movement." Musk looked around, his eyes softening as he watched a group of young people animatedly discussing something at a nearby table. "No, Claire," he said quietly. "We did." He stood after a while, finishing his coffee and placing the empty cup neatly on the table. "Time for me to go. But don't let this place lose its soul, okay?" Claire laughed lightly. "I won't." As he walked out the door, Claire felt a deep sense of gratitude. Musk's departure wasn't an ending, it was a continuation of everything they had built. She glanced at the plaque beneath the framed red hat and read the words once more. "The world doesn't change through silence. It changes through connection. Start with a conversation." Asterisk. For a moment, she let herself imagine where Musk might go next, whose table he might sit at, and what stories he might hear. Then she turned back to the cafe, ready to keep the conversations going. And with that, the legacy of the Red Hat Cafe lived on, not as a place, but as an idea, one that reminded people, in every corner of the world, that understanding begins with simply sitting down and listening.